Entering college, I swore I would not go to Hillel. I'd possibly go for high holidays, but not as a regular for Shabbat, and certainly not for social events. So naturally, my very first day of college, I went to Hillel for their welcome back barbecue. And maybe it was because I saw there was free food, or maybe it was just because I was missing my community. But whatever it was, I found myself there. And from the minute I stepped inside Hillel, it changed everything I knew about my own Judaism. There was no expectation of being observant, and honestly, no expectation of knowing anything about Judaism. It was a place where anybody can figure out what that meant to them. And a couple years later, I came out as transgender, and that quickly threw a wrench in everything I knew about my own Judaism. To be trans and Jewish? I didn't know if it was possible for me. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know anybody who was trans and Jewish. And when I finally came out to my Hillel rabbi, she didn't just say, "Congratulations, that's wonderful." She asked me, "What can Hillel do for you?" Because sure, as a queer Jewish student, I didn't feel marginalized, which is great, which is how I'm sure most queer Jewish students feel. But inclusivity is more than just words of affirmation. It's actions Hillels can take to create space. So after I graduated, I realized Hillel was the right career path for me. But as involved as I was also incredibly irritating because I never went on Birthright. I mean, I was asked a million times, "Why don't you go on Birthright? It's such a great experience." And every single time I thought of a different excuse of why I couldn't go, why I didn't want to go, why I could go later. But the truth of the matter was, I was scared. And not for the reasons you may think, because there was tension in Israel or I was afraid to get on a plane. I was afraid to be me abroad. At the time, I didn't have an ID that reflected who I was in name or in gender. I mean, I was afraid just to go to the bar and show the bouncer my ID. How was I supposed to go to Israel, where I had all of these worries of being questioned or detained or sent home? I couldn't do that to myself. So at 24 years old, I'm about to start working for Hillel, an organization that heavily encourages students to go on Birthright, and I had never stepped foot inside the country. And so we worked it into my contract that I would go that winter on a Birthright trip. And so I decided to go with Sokolov on a queer Birthright trip. And from the minute I entered the country, I loved it. I loved Israel. But I didn't love the trip. I made some friends, but honestly, people were not educated on trans folk. Some of them made horrible jokes and comments, and it made me feel marginalized on a queer Birthright trip. And I thought to myself, how could this have happened? And so when I came back from Israel, I was incredibly frustrated. And I thought to myself, would I have gone on a queer Birthright trip had it been offered to me in college? And then I thought again, well, why isn't Hillel doing a queer Birthright trip? So I approached my colleague Hench, who was working for OSU at the time, and I said, why don't we start a queer Birthright trip for Hillel? We've never done it before. It's past the point where we need it. Let's just do it. She was on board right away. So we came up with a pitch. We went to Hillel International and said, we need to do this trip. And by the end of the summer, our trip was approved, and we started getting to work right away. We made it our second jobs. We reached out to our colleagues. Some of them said, "This sounds amazing. We'll do anything we can to help you." Some of them never responded because they were busy, and frankly, this wasn't on their radar. And then some of them responded, "This sounds great, but our Hillels are already inclusive. Our students feel comfortable going on our campus trip. They don't really need this." And I was taken aback by that. We use this word inclusivity a lot at Hillel. It's become a buzzword. But what does it mean? When we started planning with Hillel International, we had to think about the unique needs of our queer students. We had to be strategic in our planning and think about things a typical Birthright trip may not have to think about. Such things like, where would our trans and non-binary students go to the bathroom? How do we create a gender-neutral B'nai Mitzvah? How do we put a queer lens on everything we do? We were supposed to go that winter, but we didn't end up having enough participants. And as devastated as we were, we realized we can't just give up now. We have to try again for summer. And so we regrouped. We added a pride parade element. We kept reaching out to our colleagues. We pitched it to every person that would listen. And by the end of summer registration, we had 24 participants. And Hillel International said, that's enough. The trip is going to go. And we were so excited. We had been working on this trip for over a year, and it was finally going to happen. And after my excitement died down, I started to get anxious. I thought to myself, oh my gosh, we were supposed to have 30, but we only had 24. What if somebody drops out? Are we still going to get to go? And that worry stayed with me until we got on the plane to go to Israel. There were some struggles on this trip, and some I really didn't think we'd overcome. But we did it. We explored Israel through a queer lens. We met locals at LGBTQ centers in Tel Aviv and Jerusalem. We cried together at Yad Vashem not only over the lives of our Jewish families, but our queer ones. We stood together at the mixed gender side of the Kotel and felt like we all belonged. And we celebrated our lives together at Tel Aviv Pride in a sea of 250,000 people. When Shabbat rolled around on the trip and it was time to do the B'nai Mitzvah, my anxiety went up again. How was I supposed to make this different and special for our participants? I didn't have to. They did that themselves. They got up and read their Torah portions, sure, but they gave some of the most heartfelt speeches I had ever heard. Some talking about how this small birthright B'nai Mitzvah meant more to them than the ones they had spent months preparing for as teenagers. And so there were no longer tears about drama or heartbreak, but the love that we had for each other and the love that we had for ourselves. And I had never felt so connected or proud of our participants. Most of them have never had a community like this. And on the way back to the airport, they were helping each other write coming out letters to their families and posting on social media about how much this trip shaped them. It seems so obvious to me how important this trip was, but not everybody understood why it needed to exist. People felt like this trip was self-defeating. Why separate queer Jews from other Jewish students? Isn't the point of Hillel to be inclusive and pluralistic? Yeah, it is. But it's not enough. We live in a world where our basic human rights are trying to be stripped from us. At Hillel, in our everyday lives, ally needs to be a verb. And allyship is a willingness to work with and on behalf of others, to fight oppression, to create equality, actively doing the heavy lifting. We need to do differently, not just feel differently. Even for our inclusive Hillels, what is our benchmark? Is it that we simply don't want our queer students to feel marginalized? We have students of all different backgrounds. We make an effort to create unique programming for them. Why are our queer students any different? We have a trip to Israel just for Jews. We see the benefit of being around and experiencing things with people who are like us. And queer Jews are different. We need to meet our students' needs maximally, not just minimally. How do we help our queer students feel fully seen at Hillel? And if there is no queer staff, how do they see themselves modeled? We all want to be seen in the world in different capacities, and that's not always a given privilege to people. Our students come from so many different communities. In order to be inclusive to them, we first need to realize that Judaism is only one part of who they are. Their other identities can and should be incorporated into our programming and how we present ourselves as an organization. And I know some of you may be thinking, I don't have any experience with this. I want to do better, but where do I even begin? Even starting with something as simple as pronouns in your email signature, or having gender-neutral bathrooms at your Hillel. It can make a significant difference in a student's life and open a world of possibilities. It did for me.